Hi, it's Kirby Sommers. Today's Saturday, September 13th, and we're going to be doing a patron-only podcast and looking into who killed Chandra Levy and basically going into the ongoing mystery of the DC intern who was unalived and who apparently we still don't know who unalived her, although there are some hints that I will be sharing with you. So she was 24 years old when she was unalived in Washington, D.C. in May of 2001. And as I said, we still, or at least the public, does not know who's responsible. There's a photograph of Chandra, one of the last photographs of her. Her body was found in May of 2002. Now, she was really aspirational. She had really big dreams. She was 24. She was working for the Federal Bureau of Prisons. She hoped to join the FBI or go to law school. She had really big dreams. Instead, um, like tragically, she became the face of one of Washington, D.C.'s most infamous murder cases. And again, one that is not solved, at least on the books. It might be solved by the time we're finished with this podcast in our minds, but quote, justice, the way people seem to believe that justice it can happen, justice will not be done. So in May of 2001, when Levy was supposed to fly back to California, that's where she's originally from, for a graduation ceremony after she completed her master's degree at the University of Southern California, she vanished, like just disappeared without a trace. The investigation into her disappearance turned up a couple of clues. What it revealed was she was having an affair with Gary Condit, a married 53-year-old congressman from her hometown of Modesto, California. And that would be him on the screen. Until the 9/11 attacks later that September, her disappearance was one of America's biggest stories. It was like literally on the front page of every newspaper. It was in all the newscasts, like every night. Her because her body went missing, like nobody could find her. Um, her body was found like a year later, like May of 2002. It was found in DC's Rock Creek Park. And even though a suspect was arrested, tried, and briefly convicted, as I said, the case remains open. So let's just go back and let me share with you who she was. She was born in Cleveland, Ohio on April 14, 1977. She grew up in Modesto, California. Her parents, Bob and Susan Levy, remembered her as being a fun loving, kind of sometimes bossy toward her little brother Adam, as being like really a well-rounded girl. She was individualistic. She just had a lot of dreams for the future. She was from a very young age dreamt about either joining the FBI or becoming a lawyer. When she grew up, she was a pretty girl. She had a great personality. In October of 2000, she started to pursue her dreams. And what she did in order to do that was she moved to Washington, D.C. So she found an internship with the Federal Bureau of Prisons as part of her master's program in public administration at the University of Southern California. But sadly, she would just never go home again. She hadn't been in town long when she crossed paths with Gary Condit. Condit was married, Democratic congressman from Modesto. He gave her and a friend a tour of the Capitol, and within weeks, she was quietly telling people close to her that she, quote, started dating a congressman. Now, what Chandra did not know at this point when she met this man, which I will be sharing with you as we move forward, is that he, like many others that are have a lot of power, like a politician, a lot of money, like my abuser, that he has a secret life, and that this is not his first time, let's say, at the races, right? That this is his typical behavior, that grooming someone, and and that his private, let's call it, I'm going to try, we're on this platform, sex life was really kind of perverse, but she would not know this, and that he was really not who he pretended to be. So, but anyway, she started to tell people that she was dating a congressman. She told her aunt Linda over Thanksgiving that she had been in this relationship with this man in his 50s who, in her opinion, looked like Harrison Ford. Now, we have his picture on the screen. He doesn't look like Harrison Ford to me, but to this young, impressionable girl, that's who he apparently reminded her of. And so then she writes, everything else here in DC is going good. My man will be coming back here when Congress starts up again, she wrote. Don't tell. Now, there's a blank for the name here because apparently there was a friend of hers who worked with Condit. And so she was like, please don't tell this person who I'm seeing, since she is, she thinks that I'm dating like an FBI guy. So she kind of really wanted to keep it secret. So by the end of April of 2001, her internship had come to an end, and she prepared to go back to California to walk in the graduation, although she had actually graduated back in December. So if you know, sometimes you graduate, but you come back for the graduation ceremony, like when the official class finishes. So then, before she flew back home, she called her aunt, left a message, and said that she had something important to tell her. However, her aunt never learned what that was because just a few days later, on May 1st, 2001, Chandra Levy disappeared, and she was never, never, never to be seen alive again. So 5 days after her disappearance, her father, Bob, called the DC police. He was worried because he hadn't heard from his daughter, who was supposed to be flying home soon. Now, according to a Washington Post article from 2008, he learned that she had been in contact, with Gary Condit. So her mother, Susan, said, she believed their daughter was dating Condit, and Bob finally told this to the police. So the police went to Chandra's apartment. Now they found her voicemail because at the time people had, those message boxes, whatever they're called, and people would leave messages, and you just come home and you turn them on, and they had these, you can retrieve your messages in that way. And so her voicemail was full of messages, including two from Condit. The congressman seemed concerned about her whereabouts. They also found her laptop in her apartment, though a police sergeant accidentally corrupted the search history. Okay, this is what I'm going to call an intentional accident, as we have seen, let's say, in the Epstein case with so many internal accidents happening, right? And then, however, they got someone like, one of these guys that knows everything about computers at some point, and they were able to determine her last internet searches. So on the morning of the day she disappeared, she checked out several websites, including Southwest Airlines, and she went to Condit's website, to the homepage of his website. She visited the Washington Post website where she checked the weather, and she read about Rock Creek Park, a sprawling 1,754-acre city park. Now, she lived near the park, but it was also filled with hiking trails and all kinds of things. And police speculated that she might have gone for a walk or a run in the park because she canceled her gym membership, basically because she was going to go back home. Now, when I heard about this, when it was happening, I remember thinking, okay, I would probably check out a place that I had never been to, which was the way I saw it at the time, and I still see it at the time. It doesn't seem to me that she was going there or that she knew it very well, even though she had already spent some, a good amount of time in this place. So to me, at the time, and as we progress, this may very well be the case. It seemed to me that she had been instructed to go there to quote meet someone, and that someone, in my opinion, at the time was Gary Condit. Okay, so that's what they found as far as her last searches on her computer. Um, so it's basically, this park is twice the size of Central Park in New York City, and investigators, they did suspect that she had gone to exercise, and initially when they were searching, nothing came up. So since the police didn't really obtain security footage, like there was footage, but they did not obtain it in her apartment until more than 7 days had passed, they were never able to determine what time she left or if she left alone. And like the way that her apartment building maintained the security footage, it's like they changed it. It was recorded over every 7 days, so that by the time they went to retrieve it to see, did she leave alone? Did she leave with somebody? What time did she leave her apartment? It was too late. Again, this is another mishap, right? And I don't think mistakes happen like, without there being a deeper reason. I'm just very suspicious of a lot of things. And I recall always being a little bit suspicious about this. Okay. So, meanwhile, the story about this DC intern who had been having an affair with this congressman and then disappeared, like, made this case. It was like I said, it was everywhere. I remember they interviewed Gary Condit, and he was like, I didn't have an affair with her. I was not involved with her. Like, that's just what they all do. Not me. There was no relationship with Levy. Privately, however, it appears that he did admit to, quote, an affair, and I'm using that word in air quotes, with the, some investigators. He basically said, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I was having, quote, an affair. All right. So Brad Garrett was one of the lead investigators in Chandra's case, and he said that Condit was initially not helpful, and and that he doubted he was responsible for her disappearance. And he went on to say, what would be his motive in harming her? His life was going on. He was still married. He was a congressman. She was just somebody that was, quote, passing through his life. So, like this, to this, quote, lead investigator, this was just another woman passing through this man's life. So, Condit adamantly denied harming or killing Chandra. And he was in all the media, and basically this is what he said to the world. I've been married for 34 years. And he began saying this on August of 2001. Now, this is just 1 month before 9/11. So we know that once 9/11 happens, this is just not going to be news anymore. So in August, in an interview with ABC News, he was like, I have not been the perfect man, and I've made my share of mistakes, but out of respect for my family and out of a specific request from the Levy family, I think it's best that I not get into those details about Chandra Levy. So, but at this point, there was the speculation about this girl's death. Was just feverish. It's kind of similar to what we're seeing now with the Epstein documents. That's kind of the level of interest that the public had for, where is this girl? And what about, did he kill her? Did he not kill her? But then, like I said, 9/11 happened, and then boom, silence, nothing. Okay, so what happens next? So the media is now consumed with the 9/11 attacks. Chandra's all but forgotten. But then on May 22nd of 2002, a man and his dog found human skeletal remains in Rock Creek Park. Now, they did this thing, you can identify her body was completely decayed, but the dental records confirmed that the remains belonged to Chandra. Investigators found only a handful of other clues. They recovered a sports bra, underwear, a sweatshirt, running shoes, her Sony Walkman, and jogging pants with knots tied at the bottom, which kind of made no sense. It still makes no sense. All right. Um, so the investigators believe that the pants that were knotted could be evidence that she was restrained before her death. But aside from declaring her case a homicide, they could not determine how she had died. Like even that was a mystery. And even a bigger mystery, they couldn't determine who killed her. In 2007, they circled back to a guy who had attacked women in the park before. This guy was an El Salvadorian immigrant named Ingmar Guandique, and I'm going to put his photograph up on the screen. Okay, that's the man that they decided to focus on. And in 2002, he had been sentenced to 10 years in prison for assaulting two women at knife point in the very same park. One in May of 2001 and one in July 2001. And so, from what I remember of that time, I, like most people, I wasn't as I wasn't the way I am now, which means question everything. So when I heard that they caught this guy and it sounded plausible that he had already sort of assaulted two women in the same park, I'm thinking, oh, okay, they found her killer. And then I, like everyone else, stopped thinking about it. But to be frank with you, Chandra Levy's case has been on my mind for many years, and especially when I began focusing on the Epstein case. So then on May 1st, 2001, the day that Chandra Levy sort of disappeared, um, this man, young man at the time, Guandique, had apparently missed a day of work. He worked at a construction company. So investigators initially considered him a suspect, but then they decided he wasn't involved. Now you're going to see how this is so weird. So, like, they think he's a suspect because of what happened, but then they're like, nah, that's not who killed her. Now, one of his cellmates, a man by the name of Armando Morales, later told investigators that he had confessed to her unalivement as like a robbery that went wrong, alleging that, well, homeboy, I killed that blank, but I didn't rape her. Now, here's the thing as we keep going. I mean, I'm gonna. So that's his mugshot. Okay. Now, in 2009, he was charged with Chandra Levy's murder. In 2010, though a very small amount of DNA found on Levy's clothing did not match him or Condit, he was found guilty. Now, there was no DNA on her body, whatever her remains, or on her clothing. Not a drop of DNA. But they still found him to be guilty, and he was sentenced to 60 years in prison. Okay, there was yet another twist to this case. In 2015, prosecutors agreed to retrial that Guandique kept insisting because he kept saying, I'm sorry, I didn't kill her. You've got the wrong guy. So, and the reason for the retrial was that Morales, the so called star witness, had hidden his history of working with law enforcement. I am going to repeat that. He worked as an informant for law enforcement, meaning that he will say anything they want him to say or not say something so that even the trial, before the trial began, another witness came forward, a woman by the name of Babs Prawler, and said that Morales had been lying the whole time. So, according to a Washington Post article from 2016, Prawler initially contacted Levy's mother, Susan, saying, oh, that she has important information about this case. Now, that's why I'm hesitant to hear when somebody has, quote, important information, unless somebody is actually connected in some way to something. I don't want to hear from a third party, from somebody that's too far removed. So, as it turned out, this Prawler had met Morales, learned about his time in prison, and started recording their conversations. She claimed Morales eventually told her that he lied about confessing to killing Levy. And even though she had several recordings of him, none of them appeared to back up her claims. Morales' attorney was like, he never lied about his conversation with Mr. I mean, it's like the whole thing it got so messy. I guess that's where I'm trying to go with this. That and there was no DNA, and now there's a lie, and there's another liar, and things are happening, and there are just weird connections to, let's call it, the investigation. That um, the trial, the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. announced that it could not prove the murder case against him beyond a reasonable doubt. So he was, instead of letting him go, they deported him back to El Salvador many years later. So this happened, don't forget, this happened in 2001. He was deported, and then um, theoretically, her unalivement remains a mystery. However, um, when this was started to happen, and a lot of this stuff has been scrubbed, 27 other women had stepped forward, claiming they had sexual relationships with this congressman, including two who were at the time only 15 years old. And these girls, they were like, no, 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 it was not, quote, a relationship. He R worded me. And these are the two 15-year-old girls who basically said that he violently R-worded them when he was still a state assemblyman, so years earlier, right? So Condit was described by one attorney involved in the case as a serial predator of women. One of the women who met Condit at a Harley Davidson convention. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Jeffrey Epstein was very much involved with Harley Davidson, the company. This is all, if you start digging into any of these stories, you will find connections to uh, Charles Manson, to the Rolling Stones, to a lot of things, through the bikers, through, you will start any of these stories when you start to lift the upper crust, which crusts over and it form like, then you can't really get in. So you have to really break through that crust, which is what I do on a daily basis with everything I work on. He was somebody that liked S&M. He went to leather bars. He had kinky S&M sex, and in fact referred to women that he was involved with at the time his sex slaves. And he used code names with these women when talking on the phone. He didn't use his real name. He used a code name and he used code words. He refused to wear condoms. And when somebody protested, he was like, well, there's a cure for AIDS anyway. So here's the thing. Very powerful men who are in positions of power, appear to have an insatiable appetite. And they don't care who they hurt. They have no feelings for anybody else. And they use children. In this case, it were the two 15-year-olds that he R-worded, and he R-worded other women, but they didn't step forward. One of them was so terrified for her life that she really didn't even want to say anything. However, does it really matter if you say something against a politician? No, because in this case, he was very protected. He remains free. I believe he is teaching. Let me see if I have a note here on what he's doing today. So, like, he's a former politician. He was born on April 21st, 1948. He represented California's 18th congressional district in the House of Representatives from 1989 to 2003. And yeah, he gained national attention after the May 1st disappearance. I'm sorry, after the May 2001 disappearance of Chandra Levy, who, as I said, when I began this, that she's an intern with the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Now, they were, quote, found to be having an affair. At least that's what she believed. For him, this was just another woman. There were like several dozen plus the two little girls that he R-worded, okay, found to have been murdered. Now, during the trial, a reporter said that there was a very well-known reporter and author basically appeared on one of these high level, not high level like a CNN show. And he said that he learned that it was his understanding, based on information he had been able to obtain, that he was involved in having her kidnapped, and that her unalivement, some friends of Condit, he alleged, kidnapped, that he paid an undisclosed amount to the people that were part of this conspiracy to get her out of the house and unalive her. Now, whenever somebody came up with anything like this, by the way, and more people did, because people were like searching and really like, and this is a mainstream author and journalist at the time. He's no longer alive, but he was a well-respected man who got some information. Well, whenever something like this happened, this guy Condit sued everyone for, quote, defamation. And, even though you can't really prove it, yes or no, because it's my belief as well, frankly, that Gary Condit did have a hand in her disappearance, especially when you look at the fact that he was involved with S&M and all kinds of things, and her phone was still in her apartment. She the search for the park and the whole thing, it's just very suspicious. But we have to get back to the fact that even today, as we're demanding the release of the Epstein files, these men are protected. And Gary Condit, way back in 2001, and even before that, was calling the females that he managed to fool, he was calling them his sex slaves. So I'm going to leave you guys with this photo of Chandra and Gary. And, the next time you read something in mainstream, I would just say, always try to look for what you're not being told, because that's what I do. Okay, guys, till next time. Have a good day. Bye.